Oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Wednesday and you know it's noon. And so, guess what time it is? Time for Naked with Dr. Money. Well, today is another week, another hopefully opportunity that you, since last week, took time to love on you, took time to think about and reflect on your plans, and took time to release anything that is a barrier to being able to go forward with executing and fulfilling your plans. Well, as you know, the purpose of Naked with Dr. Money is to share a little bit of my journey as the CEO of ZenoVerse Wellness Group, and how I maintain my mind, body, and soul while encouraging you all to develop and maintain your mind, body, and soul by having some type of wellness practice that you participate in. Because what we believe is holistic wellness requires not just mental, um, but also physical and spiritual care. If it is that you're going to live your best life and be your best self. So at the 420 Wellness Jamaica, turquoise, and we have another brand that we're going to be introducing as well soon. At all of our resorts, the one thing that is consistent is we believe that in assisting you with maintaining your mental health, that helps to release you from emotional traumas. Your physical health, we focus on making sure that your gut is healthy, because if we can get your gut healthy, then we believe that that'll have beneficial effects. And then lastly, spiritual release, so that you can resume your ancestral assignments. Because we believe that we're all here for a purpose and we all have an assignment. And sometimes we get so busy with other things that we get distracted and we fail to get back to our assignments. Well, today I'm going to have a conversation with a gentleman who, from the time that I met him, I found him to be pretty interesting and pretty fascinating. And I was so happy to have the opportunity to be able to work with him, to collaborate. We both serve as advisors to a company, and to get to know him over this period of time. George Davis is someone who has, journeyed not only in the corporate world, but in arts, in entertainment, um, having started his career early on with Sony. He began at the time that Sony was moving into television and entertainment. And he was one of those, early on mavericks going out and traveling the world, helping to expand the company. Also working for a foreign organization, again, at a time that, people were still getting to know what is their management style like, what are their demands like. And then also transitioning after many successful years in the cable TV side of the business into the arts world, where he served as the executive director of the African American Museum in Los Angeles, California. And then I've become acquainted with George, like I said, in his retirement phase, where he serves as an advisor to entrepreneurs and up and coming organizations, executives who could benefit from his value. So, our conversation, as always, is around mindset. So, I'll ask him the same thing. Does he believe mindset is a result of nature, nurture, a little bit of both? And then we'll talk about how he believes his mindset has influenced him to be motivated to take certain actions, and how those actions turned into manifestations. And I forgot to mention, I'll let him talk about the family side, because he is a proud, father, grandfather. I don't think great grand. No, I think just grand. So we'll let him tell a little bit more. Please welcome with me, George Davis. Hey, George.
Hey, Stephanie.
How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm good. No great grandfather. Uh,
Like, don't move you too fast.
but my oldest grandson's a freshman, about to be a sophomore at Howard. So hopefully he won't meet any young lady on campus. And the next time we do the there'll be a different story. But no, I'm really thank you for inviting me today, and the kind words. Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking forward to our conversation. I think I also kind of teased you a little bit. Just, when we talk, sometimes I tell you about my growing up. I was younger than the boomers, so I didn't quite I didn't get the corporate experience that some of the boomers, really had an opportunity to experience.
Mhm.
But I admired having the opportunity to work with those boomers because I was an entrepreneur. Thankfully, there were many who were in corporate position, and
Mhm.
they were willing to allow me access
Right,
to how they were doing business,
right,
allow me access to opportunities. I remember one of my colleagues worked for PG&E and said, "Hey, I think there's an RFP that your company should bid on." And I was like, "Well, I was young. I'm 19, 20 years old. I wasn't sure exactly how to do an RFP." But
right,
what he did was he took the time to
right,
bring me a sample RFP. And he
right.
said, "I know you can do this because I've seen
Mhm.
your writing." And once he showed me the format, he was right. Oh, yeah, I'd done that before. I just hadn't done one at the size and scale that I needed to for a PG&E. But lo and behold, I did it. I was successful. I won the contract. But that was because, again, someone was willing to say, "Hey, I'm going to show you the way." That informed my entrepreneurial journey. That made me a different type of, I think, an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur interested in building employees. I never was interested in being a solopreneur.
Right.
So that, those kind of blessings. And so you worked with one of, the prestigious organizations, Sony. Why don't you, kind of walk us through,
Yeah.
because,
Well, yeah. Well,
questions,
first, yeah,
mindset.
yeah. First off, there's a great saying that the freed people said, and that was, "When you cross a river, you leave a stone behind." And so that gentleman left a stone behind for you, And so it was expected of our generation that we realized we were the first. So I was a senior vice president of technical. I believe I was the first executive there in 90 years. And the second and third Black executive I hired, so it was, you can complain about things, but you realize you're in a unique place, and that you get mad or whatever, but then you're the only Black guy they know, right? So then you got to bring other people in, and it doesn't have to just be employees. It could be vendors or contractors, other type of people, and that's how things change. Anyway, my journey, I'll try to be quick because it's a crazy journey. I started as a radio announcer. I'm from Seattle, Washington. My father's an immigrant from Jamaica. My mother's from Chicago. That forms a lot of my worldview a lot, because of, I saw him studying to become an American. And no matter what we were seeing on TV with people being water hosed or racism, he always would say that, he was going to be really poor in Kingston. And he has a house, a station wagon, and a family. So he felt he was rich. So it always kind of depends on your reference point of where you start a lot. I think that formed a lot of my just mindset of not, when people tell you can't do this, I just really, that was important. The other thing was I was raised in Seattle, which back in the day was kind of known as a racially tolerant city. So we didn't have the hostility of Chicago or parts of LA or obviously the South. We had our own little issues, but in general, it was more of a quirky place where they're looking at you as more of an individual than as a race. So that was also very helpful. But anyway, I started as a radio announcer in the Seattle area. I won't get into the whole story. A lot of funny stories. And I moved into television in a small market in Washington State. Worked in NBC affiliate in Portland. Was cameraman, engineer, coordinated live television for the ABC station in Seattle. And then I got hired to do the Olympics and work at Eyewitness News in 1984 here in Los Angeles. I moved from that. I was able to cover the Reagan-Gorbachev summit in Geneva, Switzerland in 1985. And I decided I wanted a James Bond life, although I was married. I wanted a James Bond life. I wanted to do international. I really was fascinated with that. So I tried to figure out how I could navigate my career to move international. The other thing was I also just saw, I wanted to cut down the amount of people that controlled my life and my career. And I felt the only way that I could do that, learning about capitalism, was either selling something or being the boss on the cost side of things. So I was always on the cost side of operations and technical operations. I call it techie with a tie. But I realized that if I was really going to have freedom to truly be who I was and to not have people that I didn't think were as smart as me or whatever telling me what to do, because I remember getting assigned to stupid stories sometime as a camera crew, which might have been fun if you're 27, but I said, what I want to do with that in my 50s, you know? So I wanted to be on the management side. And I started going to school at night and eventually got my MBA at USC. So yeah, I was a vice president of international networks for Sony Pictures. Real quickly, if you went overseas in the late 90s, as a hotel, you might see CNN and you see a lot of government channels. So all these countries deregulated their television systems to now have cable and satellite, but they didn't have content. So they went to the American studios for the content because it's so expensive for them to create their own content with car chases and all that. So we would dub and subtitle American TV shows. Sony owned the Columbia Pictures Library. And so we launched a bunch of cable networks in India, Latin America, all over the world. So that really fostered my global travel. And I would go to a lot of museums and cultural places. And that kind of got my interest that made my transition later on the art museum side.
So thank you. That was a very great, overview because it packed in a lot of things. Man, I have great questions. I don't know why I didn't pick up the mom from Chicago bit before, but that resonates.
So you got yes, you got
yeah.
My mom has a master's in social work degree from Boston College in 1953. The only person to have a degree. So I have the degree, and then I have the blade from my dad, from the blade. So it really helped me a lot in the entertainment business.
Well, it's so funny because, as you know, I've been, I think I'm honorary Jamaican at this point. I've spent so much time, peeking around that little bear that I've fallen in love with, and am now convinced that it's the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of, my next, right? So I have a special spot in my heart, but I also understand that, the country is challenging, for people and its citizens. But anybody that has met a Jamaican, especially Jamaicans, I'd say of the boomer generation, they're hard workers.
Oh, yeah.
And just the best of the best, meaning there's a determination. So when we talk about mindset, so when I ask you, in your opinion, how much, when do you think you first recognized you had a particular mindset? And do you think it was more the result of the nature? Now looking at your two, I know people from Chicago, those are good folks. For some reason, I'm from Oakland, and Chicago and Oakland, we just, it's an instant connection, right? So I say there's a similar journey there.
It's kind of like just growing up in Seattle. We're such in the corner of the country. My mom and dad were only child, so I didn't have uncles and cousins and stuff. We were out there. So you have kind of this, I won't call it pioneer spirit, but kind of this kind of different vibe living a place like that. There's a lot of nature around, obviously, in the Northwest. We go camping, and so I kind of got my love of nature. I don't know. I'm the oldest of six. My father died when I was in ninth grade. So I became grown a lot quicker. And I just, a lot of cities, older Black generation would always tell you to get a safe job.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Seattle, a safe job was at Boeing. That was a big employer there. And I was a crazy person who wanted to work in entertainment. And not just entertainment, I also felt that I wanted to see if I could be a big fish in a big pond. I was comfortable I could be a big fish in the Seattle pond, but very few people jumped into the bigger pond because it wasn't safe. And so you had to have a certain kind of mindset. And that pond doesn't come the way you want it always. So that my pond, LA, was I had a full-time job at a TV station in Seattle. They loved me. It was going great. And I got offered to go to KABC in LA, but it was called vacation relief, where at the end of 6 months, you might not have a full-time job. So not only are you relocating, I already had a young family, see what I'm saying? But the full-time job might not have been the thing that had been teed up to me. And that was the opportunity. And so each time you have to kind of visualize yourself. This is a good one, Stephanie. It used to be called the hockey puck effect, where they say Wayne Gretzky, everyone follows the puck. And Wayne Gretzky figured where the puck was going, and he skated there and waited for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I always try to skate where I thought things were going. Mm-hmm. And then I had to be realistic about what were the gaps for it to happen. Do I need a degree? Do I need to learn a foreign language? What are the things for it to happen? So I think it's a combination of environment, family support, but I have 5 brothers and sisters, and if we did a different call, not on this live, there's a wide range of success in my family, or it's very widely. So sometimes you wonder how people have the same parents. So I just felt that I had a calling that was bigger, but what the reality part of it for me was that was really important, because affirmative action was really happening and in the late 70s. And my white colleagues always assumed that I didn't have the background to get these jobs. And I kind of found out what their career journey was. And it was very similar to a baseball player. They don't start at the Dodgers. They started in smaller cities, the white guys. So I said, well, if I'm competing with the white guys, they're not going to really respect me unless I have a similar background of them. Then they can get away from this "you're not qualified" stuff, And so that's why I was in Portland and Tri-Cities, Washington, and in smaller cities, because the way broadcasting used to work, you couldn't get in KTLA or even Las Vegas unless you'd worked in a smaller market, And a lot of times Black folks, we didn't want to do that. My joke was, who's going to cut my hair? Or there's no radio station, or if you're single, who are you going to date? So those kind of things were things that was reluctant to get away from that comfort zone to go to these smaller places. But what happened was it kind of gave me insurance from people who I call them the Muppet balcony, who always, that are going to say something about you, that once they felt that I had equally paid my dues, it enabled me to have the right mindset. In other words, it made me to carry out my mindset without a lot of drama. That makes sense? So the mindset's one part of it, but you got to execute the mindset, right? And you have to be comfortable and confident enough to be able to execute it, but you can't execute on your own if your colleagues or people don't view you a certain way. That's a very heavy treadmill. So I want the treadmill to not be, it's hard enough being African-American back in the day and being the only one when everything started opening up with affirmative action, but to also have the pressure of really not feeling that you were qualified. That would have been very difficult. So each step I tried to think about, honestly looking in the mirror of what my gaps were. Mm-hmm. And I have brutal friends who are not afraid to call me on stuff, because you have a disservice if you only have people that just do the wave and tell you you're great. You need to have people that are going to be straight and honest with you.
You see, now you dropped another nugget. Wait. We're going to have to unpack that in a second. But before we go back to that, because I think that is a problem with some people right now. You know, I've encountered people as adults who don't realize that they're their reason that they can't get to the next level because they're too sensitive for feedback, and they lack the ability to discern the difference between what is critical and what is meant as, you know, something to hurt you. It's not. If someone is investing their time in giving you feedback, that is a commitment that someone is making to help you be your better self, because we all have blind spots, right? So there's things that we know that we don't know, and then there's some things that we don't know that we don't know. And if you have not built a network, or if you have not built a space, you know, so that you could develop yourself. And that's really why this conversation around mindset is so important. So when I go back to what you were just saying about, you know, in the 70s and the affirmative action, I wanted to kind of touch on that part of the conversation, because recently we've had rulings about affirmative action. And so I want to kind of unpack that a little bit, you know, from then and now.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think of is, again, you know, your determination, like you said, to make sure that you had similar experiences. So if nothing else, you knew that you were qualified. You know, I made a similar decision about that when I was first introduced to Jamaica almost 30 years ago, when I was still CEO of my advertising agency, and I knew that I wanted to transition into real estate development. Someone sort of offered to kind of put me in position, but that felt like that would be like I'd just be a figurehead.
You wouldn't have the credibility and that would be the first impression people would have, which even if you were ready, it just makes your life, it just makes things more difficult.
Yeah, it was another country. It was it was a many barriers, but also the thing that really made me say no, I wanted to learn development bottom up, was that at that time I was in litigation with some minority shareholders in my company, all because of a staff person, a white woman or Jewish woman on their staff, basically having an opinion about me just because she just did not like me. But in this role, I knew I was competent. So the challenges, I was slamming them. And so that also made me feel like, well, how would I step into a role where I'm not as competent? What if somebody else decides that they want to treat me the same way? So now back to the affirmative action and the opportunities. And then also this conversation that's happening now with not only, because it started with the higher education, but since then I've seen going after venture funds that, you know, so so George, what say you?
So I have a very contrarian opinion about that. And it's not always, most of my friends don't agree with it. I just believe, you know, I hired a guy one time who was literally a boat person from Vietnam. He had escaped, and his work ethic is kind of the same with immigrants. You know what I mean? Affirmative action was initially established because there was a kind of an analogy that you're starting and someone has run 5 laps ahead of you.
Sure.
So they wanted to catch up the laps. It was equal opportunity, not equal results. It was equal opportunity, not equal results. And so I think there became a whole industry. First it was EEO, then affirmative action, and now DEI. And I've always said, the closer you get to what a business actually does, the better you're going to do. So if you're working at a movie studio, but you're catering or the parking lot compared to you're making the movie, the closer you are to what it does. And so every time a recession happens, all these EEO, affirmative action, DEI people get laid off. And also we as a community, we highlight them at our galas and our dinners. And then we have people like you that actually run, I'd hate to say it like that, but are running businesses. You know, I was traveling the world setting up multi-million-dollar deals, but the guy who was the external affairs guy would be getting all these awards all the time. It kind of hurt my feelings, by the way. Yeah, but because we kind of got drawn to that. If you look at black magazines back in the day, they had to count on cigarette ads and liquor ads to make money. So they would highlight those executives as being the top black executives in the country. And we had other people that might own 20 apartment buildings or other kind of things. And so I think we kind of got misdirected away from true capitalism. We're in a capitalist country, right? So like you look at the future tech, what's happening is we get at Google, we're not the top 50, we're not the initial 50 employees because we're at a safe job and we're reluctant to jump onto Snapchat or these other kind of places. So part of it is, I think, really getting us into this, away from this comfort pillow, and you got to get engaged. You have to have the same skills. You got to learn another language. You got to know your technology. You got to schmooze different people from different backgrounds. You got to not just have black friends or just white friends. You got to get in the mix, and you gotta be good, and you got to show your skills. And like I used to say, one of the reasons why I liked the side of the business I got in television, I said that if someone screwed up the Super Bowl, they didn't care if the white guy went to Harvard. He got fired.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I felt that was a side of the business that I could actually show my gift.
Right.
And I was around a lot of white dudes who probably are Trump supporters or whatever, but they respected George Davis. And so I think that's the mode that we got to really teach our kids. That's how I raised my kids, and the people that I mentor. That is really kind of like, I feel we can compete with anybody, and so I'll end real quick. I want to say everyone something else back before, a real quick story, which really helped me out a lot about not taking stuff personal, Stephanie. I was a general manager at a satellite company before Sony Pictures, and my boss chewed me out, and I got my shoulders down because I didn't see it coming. And he barked to his assistant to get Gabby on the line, and Gabby was a general manager for the East Coast. And he started chewing her out. And so it was general manager chewing out day. It didn't matter who was sitting in the chair. So it helped me to not take stuff personal that anyone in that job was going to get chewed out. So a lot of time we take things personal. We ask, and you got to ask whether or not, does it come with the territory? You know what I mean? If you're running a museum, you're going to have people not happy with the exhibits. It comes with the territory. There's certain things that are not race that we take sensitive, or it's not gender, it's not LGBTQ. It's just someone's a jerk, or someone is just brutal and hard edged, and it's not personal. And then when you see them talk to a fellow Jewish person that way, you realize it's not racial. So that helped me a lot to kind of not take stuff personal, because once you go there, you can get into all, and then you have people enabling you into that type of mentality, and you're not able to fulfill your ambition or your dream at all. It gets stuck and off the freeway.
Yes. I think it's understanding the culture that you're operating within, not only the culture in terms of the organization or the people that you may be working with, but also the culture of the industry. Definitely when I moved from advertising into real estate development, I jumped right into, the real hard, construction industry. In a place where, believe it or not, I could be the first. I'm sitting here going, I was the highest ranking, Black woman in every corporation or organization that I was a part of along my real estate development journey. In some cases, I was the only. Still, right? You say, like, how is that possible in the 2000s, right? But that was very much possible.
Right.
And what allowed me to be there was performance. I affectionately go by Dr. Money, but the real reason is because every company that I had an opportunity to be a part of, my evaluation was about how much money I saved the company or made. I always kept Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
because math, I knew I could depend upon.
Right.
Math wasn't soft and fluffy. It's what's the
Right.
number say, right?
And your board members and colleagues that were Caucasian were not on the board of the NAACP, right?
Right, right,
They respected your skills,
right,
and
right.
that you knew your stuff, right?
Yes. At the bottom line, they made money. And as
Right,
long as they kept
right,
making money,
right,
then I would continue to have an employment
right.
opportunity. But unlike prior corporate work, in development, there were no 401ks. There were no,
Yeah,
that just meant I got a paycheck for that week.
sure, sure,
Next week could be a different
sure,
thing. And
sure.
then, the bonuses was still a system of, one guy got all the bonus money and he decided
Yeah,
how he
he's
would
gonna
figure it out, right?
dole
And
it out,
so,
yeah.
so
Without any metrics, yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right. And
based on
so
titles or yeah.
wow. And
Whether
then
you had kids or not, you know what I mean? Yeah,
and you
yeah,
being the female and sitting there going, well, like
yeah,
on level, the guys would go on a fishing trip. Well,
yeah,
I couldn't go,
yeah.
right? But those are my peers, right?
Yeah.
Or even having the other backlash because, our team, we would have lunch together because we're discussing business at lunch,
Right.
but that's me and the fellas. So
Right.
then the other ladies working in the company, like
Yeah.
who, it's that's my position, that's my level. These are my peers. Sorry, you guys are not, right?
I was in New York with Sony Electronics, and I thought I was going to go to dinner with my colleagues from Tokyo. And the Chinese guy from Hong Kong, he said, "George, it's Japanese night." So we were not invited to the dinner. You know what I mean? But now it's a brutal story, but the cool part of it was not personal.
Right.
It's like, you know what? The Chinese guy couldn't go, the white guy couldn't go, and I couldn't go. So we all went to dinner, but they all spoke Japanese. They wanted to hang out and have a good time. Now you could never say that. You could never do a black or white night at GE. It would never happen. But again, did I file a HR report? No. It's like, hey man, this is
the culture. I had an opportunity to work with Epson briefly, and it's a different culture when you're involved in those organizations. Which again, you've touched on it, and we've kind of danced around this idea of again mindset and how that's shown up in motivations as well as manifestations. In your opinion, as we look at the state of the economy, you shared with me an article released based on a study recently completed by the Brookings Institute. And I was so grateful because I was having this argument about why I wanted some people to take my CEO boot camp because I only have a small window. I'm raising capital for my new venture to go forward, and we're going to be funded soon. And so when that happens, I won't have as much time. But at the same time, I need to have some qualified companies capable of stepping into our supply chain. And so I'm sort of, telling myself I can help get these guys ready so I have a pipeline while I'm also moving over here. And people are like, well, who are you? So the study was kind of like, thank you, Lord, because this is what I'm saying, guys. Not only are there domestic opportunities, but there's a $2 trillion minimum business opportunity on the continent of Africa that's calling some of our names. So if you want to create business generational wealth, like you said, using the hockey puck, example, you need to go where the money is. So George, what say you? The study. I know you had a chance to look at it. I mean, what do you?
Well, I mean, the thing, I think it's two things. One is everyone has to be careful when they see statistics. You got to look at who's paying for the statistics and what's really being said. So there's always the statistics about the percentage of Black businesses. What the study from the Brookings really said was, well, so many of it is sole proprietorships. It's not employees. So they're saying that if you really want to have an impact in your community, when you go to certain communities that we're in and there's potholes or the services, the employees pay taxes. Employees, hopefully own a home or they're going to the grocery store. So it was talking about the importance of Black economic development really change if there was much more of a focus in these sole proprietorships to have employees. And then, of course, not to get deep into this too, a lot of times states have so many rigorous bureaucracy things that make people are trying to do everything freelance and creative. So we have a lot of those type, like someone's doing an event management company, African American, they might have 50 people, they're not employees, they're individual contractors, but they're really saying, when you start looking at what an employer does in terms of paying taxes and workers' comp and paying into a 401k, you're able to sustain a community differently than kind of a one-off. And, too many of our barbershops and beauty salons and, small restaurants. So to me, it's really, I just feel like we really have to be much more involved in the industries of the present and the future. Yeah. You know what I mean? I always tell people you don't want to be, back in the day, certain people knew Blockbuster didn't have a future, but in the Black community, if you told your mom you were a manager at the Blockbuster in Hollywood, she would think it was great. And someone else say, "Hey man, have you heard of Netflix?" Right. So you should have gone to Netflix, not been a manager, but you would have been the original employee getting stock at a low price and so forth. So a lot of time, again, it gets into the safety thing that we're stuck with. I think that's important. The mindset has to get that it means you still have to be prepared, but you can't be in this mindset of just sticking your toe, touching the water, making all these excuses of why you're not doing something. And that can be from how you're raised. There's a lot of things that come to that about mindset. So you have to be, that's why salespeople do well, because a lot of them are fearless, But it's hard. I always say it's hard, Stephanie, you heard me say this before, to get someone who's going 60 to go 80. And it's easier if someone's going 100 to get them down to 80. Okay? So you have to, if you don't have it, I can't do much with you. Mm-hmm. Right? But if you're going too fast, I can slow you down. I can guide you. But if you just don't have, because I need you at least a 75. If you can't go there, doesn't mean you can't be an employee working for us or whatever. But if you're going to be a player, if you're going to be someone, the things you're talking about, building an amazing life and so forth, that's part of the secret sauce.
It is true. It's kind of, how do you envision yourself? And, when you mention that, I think about my own journey. I have my first business, which was a contract as an independent contractor, when I was 18. But I was fascinated with how companies were formed and lasted hundreds of years. And so my then kind of company that I was using as my marker was IBM. At the same time, I had my foot in, just for fun, building computers. I did microcomputer electronics, where I was building computers at UC Berkeley on the summer. So I was very much in that early kind of Apple and engineering and kind of tech community. I decided that I would always be kind of the closet techie, that I knew enough about technology, but I didn't want those smelly guys that didn't believe in gas to be my peers.
I call it a BS. I call it a BS detector.
Right. I was like, I didn't want to have to be in many more rooms with them. The summer at UC Berkeley was enough. Right. But with that, it was my mindset. And again, at 9, I told my mother I saw myself, I was an international business tycoon. So my goal had always been to be international, to have an organization with, hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world. So I think because of that, I've always kind of, groomed myself or looked for opportunities inside or outside of organizations that I occupied. But it was kind of around proving this thesis of, how is it then that when I develop an organization, I can create an organization that will exist, 100 years, past, just a legacy in my life. And so that has always been my ultimate aim. And someone was having this conversation with me about, in their mind, when I was describing the wellness resorts. And I said, wellness resorts. And they kept saying, you mean you're planning retreats?
Right.
And I said, no, there's a company. Have you heard of a company called Marriott? They're publicly traded. You could look online and
Yeah,
get a copy of
yeah,
their 10K
yeah,
report,
yeah.
and it'll give you an overview of their business. They develop hotels
Right, right,
and they franchise them.
right, right.
They are a very close example of the business that I'm creating, except that we have a niche market
Right,
around wellness, which is where the hockey puck is going.
right, right. Well,
Right?
and one thing I've really worked on, because you know me pretty good now, is you try not to show the face gesture when something sounds incredibly stupid, right? You're trying not to say something. What I've really come to, which is very helpful, is just realizing so many people have kind of been kind of directed in this government, preacher, employee kind of mindset. I hate to say victim, but whatever. Okay. And so I always tell them, I said, look at it as if you're the owner. Okay. So someone comes to you, they want a raise. You go, why? Well, I've been here a year. Okay. So what have you done? Well, I've been here a year. Okay, well, if you're the employer, you go, that sounds, man, you've been here a year, you deserve a raise. The owner's like, well, what did you do that year? Did you sell more apples? Did you?
Right.
No, I've been here a year. So why should I give you a raise? And if you look at it that like as an owner, the world to me is very simple. But if you look at it as an employee or a conspiracy theory, all these things out beyond your control. And I found through being in all these countries and dealing with all these cultures that there really are very common things. First off, most of the executives I dealt with in Asia went to school in the US, so they speak their language, they had Black friends, whatever. So the world is kind of got Americanized in a way, but they're just kind of like general rules of the road that are. And then there are unique cultural things that you have to be mindful of. But I just think we have to really unlock ourselves from just kind of this mindset that everything is. I'm going to speak more specifically. Everything is it has to be some kind of Black focus, or versus, yes, we're Black, but there's Elon Musk and these guys are going to be doing cross-planetary stuff.
Yes.
My grandson's at JPL, has an internship. He's a freshman. They're trying to get more of us into these things. So if we're only going to go to, continue in the industries of the past, we can't blame the man if we're not getting into industries of the future. Why are they having to get all these engineers from Taiwan and India? I'm sure those companies would rather hire Americans, even Black Americans, if they could find them with the right skills. So there's a shortage. And so anyway, I think a lot of time we impede ourselves with their own limitations a lot of times, because we think of all these things that are going to be against us. And,
exactly.
and our community wants to give us a soft landing, which is very loving and understandable, but the world just doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. And you might get whacked around, but if you don't jump in the water, you'll never know it.
That's so true, because a lot of times, and it's interesting, I was having a conversation with an entrepreneur about a business opportunity, and we were kind of having this debate because she was saying, yeah, no, I want to go into business, but I was planning to keep my job and
Yeah.
just do the business kind of part-time. And I was saying that, well, then that's fine if it is that you're planning to self-finance your business. But if an investor is going to write a check or to invest in that business, that's not an option. They're investing in you because they expect that you're going to run the business. And I realized that really what the distinction that she was struggling with making is the difference between running a piece of business within a corporation and not understanding that,
Right.
no, when and so I kept
Right.
saying, well, does the CEO at the corporation that you work for come in part-time?
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
no, it's like, yeah,
Right.
because running a business
Right.
requires more than just the part of your department or your division or what your job
Right.
functions.
I used to say you can't fire free. Okay, so someone, like your cousin, oh yeah, I have a camera, I can do the wedding. You can't
Right,
fire
right,
him. You can't fire
right,
free.
right,
So someone
right,
who's doing so if they're only doing weddings, they're concerned about the Yelp stars and showing up and not smelling liquor on their breath. If you're doing it on the weekend,
right,
whatever, right? So yeah, no, that's all part of it. I always have a saying about I have most of my friends are very creative, and I'm much more structured and trying to help people get focused and so forth. I just believe, Stephanie, fundamentally that we have a gift that we are given, and there's something that we do better than other people that's just part of the DNA. And if that gift is also connected to your dream, right? Then, so I'm good at solving problems. I'm good at landing places and so forth. When I ran the museum, I was very clear to tell people I'm not a curator. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to stand up there and pretend I'm something I'm not. So I wouldn't hire great curators. You know what I mean? So
right,
I'm a very big believer on core competencies and certain gifts. And so the company you and I are involved with, I don't really get into the financial stuff or the things I feel like you walk on water with, because I know it's taken care of, And so that doesn't mean I don't have knowledge of financial things or I have an MBA and all that, but that's not my particular gift, my particular expertise. So I think sometimes, I would have young people come to me wanting to, work in the entertainment business, and I would ask them what they want to do. And I'm multi-talented. I go, well, you know what? Back in the day in Times Square, there was always a guy that came up to you to try to sell you a watch. Okay. I said, after he got your attention, that's when he opened up his jacket. He never started with the jacket. He always started with the watch. So I asked him, what's your watch? So after I'm comfortable that you're good at selling watches, then I'll be open to you selling insurance or something else. But if you come to me with 10 different things,
right,
when I can find someone who only sells watches, who I know is worried about their reputation, they're on Yelp. This is how they feed their family. I'm going to go with that person.
exactly,
And that's a very important thing, because a lot of times in the Black community, I need to find a lawyer. Oh, I know a lawyer. Well, he's a divorce lawyer.
exactly,
You know what I mean? You need to have a business lawyer,
right,
or I know a doctor.
right,
Okay,
right,
but is he a knee doctor? Or, is
right,
he a cancer doctor? You know what I'm saying? So I'm like overly into experts. You know what I
right,
mean? And nice thing about big cities, you can find experts. You
exactly.
know?
Exactly. No, it's so important, because too often, as you say, again, that is a mistake. That's a common mistake right now when I hear people, speaking about experiences or looking to start a business. And it's like, you are taking your job and trying to make that a business. Have
Right,
you done a market study
right,
to determine the need for a particular solution?
yeah,
Is there a market that will pay you
yeah,
to solve that particular problem?
yeah,
Where,
yeah.
I love it.
I got checked really hard when I left Sony. I started my own company for a couple of years, and I had the executive office. I had the printer. I had business cards, website, brochures, and now I'm ready to open business. And this guy is OG. He goes, George, you're not in business till you have a customer. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I'm running around high side, and I got no revenue coming in. I got
Right,
no customer, but I just thought it was magically going to happen
right.
once I send out the press release for this publicist. I was so stupid.
It's the educational journey, and that's the other part. And then I think we'll probably have to wrap it up here because I can see I could go on and on and on in a conversation with you. But really, that part of not only understanding the business, the part, the real part, who's writing you the check, how many of them will continue to write you the check, why are they writing you a check, right? Do you believe that you are solving what they believe you are solving? Right.
And also, if they're heading in the blockbuster direction, don't be shocked when they stop writing you a check.
Exactly. You have to get business knowledge. And that really was my point, because a lot of times what I'm hearing from people is they are a little bit dismissive, when they say, oh, well, now, oh, you're well educated. I'm like, no, I got the paper after the fact. Trust me, I have 40 years of actual experience, practical experience being in the trenches. Don't let night school fool you.
We're both night school students.
Don't let night school fool you, because I had to put in daytime practical. Sure. Paying my dues that way, right? Sure. So, let's be clear. And so guess what? If you are at day one and I am 40 years in, we're not the same.
Yeah.
And so if you have a problem with having me give you feedback,
right,
because in your mind, you're trying to make us the same,
right,
then I don't have time for you anyway, because you're not going where it is. We need to go.
It's kind of, there's a lot of psychology in that. I think about one of the James Bond movies when they're really like, they're on a train and they're kind of guessing each person. Oh, I think you are an orphan. They're kind of looking at their clothes. And so a lot of that, I did a lot of that in international business, because it was really important to really learn the history and the culture, because you can get things twisted that are not business issues because you missed the culture or the religious. And I was with the white dude one time. He had his feet up on the train. You weren't supposed to show the bottom of your feet. So there's a lot of little things, but then there are things that are just, like I said before, universal, that are the rules of the road globally, that we have to be mindful of. And you're either going to play the game or you're not. But if you're not going to play the game, don't blame somebody else.
Right.
That's probably a good wrap up.
I think that's good. That's right. I think that's like a perfect button and bow. I mean, George,
I told someone when I was hiking the other day, I was young folks and my daughter, and they got all kind of. I'm going to make a T-shirt that says "Deal with it." You know what I mean? Just deal with it.
Just deal with it. Well, George, it has been a delight to have this conversation and to have you as a guest. I know I'll have to have you back. We'll continue the conversation. We'll even take it on the road. So, you'll have to come and check out the resorts, come on back home and beyond. Where we'll do some of these conversations live and in person.
Y'all man.
Fantastic. So anyway, I know you said that you're semi-retired and you work with folks. I mean, do you have any social media or any desire for folks to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on. I don't know the things about, but I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm pretty active there. I am semi-retired. I have a couple clients, but I'm enjoying not being in the grind for the first time in my life, because I started really 19 years old. So I'm enjoying that. My blood pressure is lower, and I'm wearing shorts even though I have a nice shirt on. So I'm enjoying the balance, and that's one thing I've learned at this stage of my life is there's a pros and cons of choices. So you can make a lot more money, but then it can affect your health differently at a certain stage of your life than it would have when I was 40. So you're really trying to figure out how hard do you want to work? Because we're all, everyone wants to make money, but what's really important? And what's important to me now is the time I spend with my grandchildren, my friends, hiking. I try to stay relevant, obviously, and that's why I enjoy working with younger people and having younger friends and all that. But I just think I do think it's important as we get to a certain age to have some time for appreciation and time for reflection and not just be. It's just sad when you see a person who works so hard and then you read a year or two later after retirement they died.
Right.
Because they didn't have other interests. Their entire mindset was Fred at Warner Brothers. They didn't have other friends or other kind of, and so I just never, that's why I have so many different interests and different boards and things, is because I want to stay curious and not just kind of, talk about the good old days,
Exactly. Be relevant and be involved.
Yeah, be
Well,
relevant. And be available when people seek you out. Make sure you're available.
mhm.
Have a cup of coffee. Call them. Return their call. 15, 20 minutes can change their life of good advice, And they might get, a lot of times they get advice from the wrong place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's also part of why I felt this conversation was so important for me. And a lot of times people would say to me in my immediate peer group, oh, well, Stephanie, you can do this, you can do that, but I couldn't do that. And I'm like, no, yes, you can. Let me pull back the onion and just kind of share my journey.
Right.
It will be a tough commitment, but it's been an interesting journey. And really, it was my son who encouraged me, Mom, go for it and do it and just keep doing it. And as you keep doing it, you'll find your way. And sure enough, he's right, because each time that I have a conversation like this, I find the blessing not only for myself in having had the conversation, but I realize the nuggets that are shared, that I don't know who all is out there, but I'm sure that having created the content, it will be either stumbled upon, if not now, eventually, right? And at that time, it will become a blessing for the next person. So I'd like to thank you again for joining me today. And we're going to say this was part 1. And we'll come back again to have a part 2 conversation.
Okay, it's been a pleasure, and I think what we shared was important, and I just think it's important that those of us who have the information and knowledge, are humble and flexible and open to share it, and this is a good place for me to do that. So I appreciate that.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch up real soon.
I can put my other shirt back on now.
Exactly. You're off camera.
I can match my shorts, so I put my hiking clothes back on. So God is good. God is good.
All right. And I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Well, guys, I'd like to thank you again. We did go a little bit long, but I think the conversation was rich and worth the extra time. Hopefully you too will agree. Remember, if it's Wednesday and it's noon Pacific Daylight Time, it's time for Naked with Dr. Money. And this is where we talk about the behind the scenes look at mindset. Is your mindset the result of your nature, your nurturing, or a little bit of both? How your mindset impacts your motivations and how you're able to finally manifest your truest desires. Well, as always, I never like to say bye without reminding you to give you a big hug and love on you. And join me again next week for another episode of Naked with Dr. Money. Take care, you. See you then.